Squid Game has made its return with Season 2, and before it premiered, I was curious whether Gi-hun would face the same games as in Season 1, or if there would be new challenges in this season. While there were fewer games than in the first season, if we count the games the recruiter set up for Wok and his boss before they went to the island, the contestants took part in a total of 5 games. So I thought it would be interesting to explain each of these games, including the mini-games that made up the 6-legged pentathlon in the new season. Here's an explanation of every game in Squid Game Season 2. And just to warn you, this video contains spoilers. Game 1, Rock, Paper, Scissors -1. The first game we saw in the season was hosted by the recruiter, with Wok and his boss as the participants. They played a two-handed variation of the classic game Rock, Paper, Scissors called Rock, Paper, Scissors -1, which was made even more intense by the addition of Russian roulette. In this version of the game, players use both hands to make their moves. Once they reveal their hands, the word -1 is called out, and the winner is determined by the hand that remains. As we saw in the show, the loser of each round faced a gun with one bullet in it, and the gun was spun. The trigger would then be pulled towards the players. If the bullet wasn't in the chamber, they would proceed to the next round. The game only ends when a player is killed. With a 1 in 6 chance of dying, the game grew increasingly unfair when the recruiter placed 5 bullets in the chamber to tip the odds toward death. Although not the most complex or creative game, it was intense due to the personal nature of the confrontation between two friends. The game went on until one player lost, and the stakes were high for survival. This version of Russian roulette is more commonly played in Korea without the added danger of a gun. Game 2, Russian roulette. In the second game of Season 2, the recruiter and Gi-hun faced off in a game of Russian roulette. Like Rock, Paper, Scissors -1, it involved a gun with 1 bullet in the chamber. The gun was spun, the trigger was pulled, and if you were unlucky, you died. The game was made even more dangerous because the chamber wasn't reset after each shot, meaning the same bullet kept circulating, making it a game of pure chance. With each pull, the odds of surviving decreased because death was inevitable as the game continued. Gi-hun was lucky enough to survive until the 6th pull, where the recruiter met his end. This was another game that could only end in death. Game 3, Red Light, Green Light. This game, which became iconic in Season 1, made a return in Season 2 due to its popularity. The rules are simple. When the light is red, you must stay completely still. When the light turns green, you have to race to the other side of the room within the allotted time. If you move during the red light, the doll, Yong-hee, detects your movement and alerts the soldiers, who shoot you on the spot. If you fail to reach the finish line in time, you're eliminated. We saw a few strategies in this season to help players survive. For instance, players who were not facing the doll could communicate and strategize, as it couldn't detect their movements. Additionally, lining up by height offered some protection, as players behind would be shielded by the person in front. Red Light, Green Light remains one of the most deadly and famous games, eliminating many players quickly. Game 4, the 6-legged pentathlon. The 6-legged pentathlon was made up of 5 mini-games. The players were split into teams of 5, and each member had to participate in a different game. To make it more challenging, the players had their legs tied together, making it harder to recover if a team member failed, and they had to continue from where they left off. The first minigame was Duck G, which we saw in Season 1. In this game, players use their own Duck G, a small disc, to flip an opponent's piece. To succeed, they needed to throw their Duck G with enough force to flip the other player's piece. Once it was flipped, they could move on to the next game. The second game was Flying Stone. Players had 2 stones, one in their hand and one in the distance. They had to throw their stone from behind a designated line to hit the other stone. If they knocked it over, they won and could move on. However, if their foot crossed the line while throwing, it would be considered a foul and they'd have to try again. It appeared simple, but was more difficult than it looked. The third game was Gongji, which required players to balance and catch tiny stones, making it one of the more challenging mini-games. There were multiple levels to this game, and we saw Daeho successfully navigating them. In this game, there are 5 stones, and the objective changes with each level. Level 1, the player throws 1 stone into the air, and while it's airborne, they must pick up the other stones stones one by one. This is repeated until they have collected all the stones. Level 2. The game remains the same, but instead of picking up one stone at a time, the player must pick up 2 stones simultaneously. Level 3. In this level, the player picks up 3 stones while 1 stone is still in the air. Level 4. The player throws 1 stone into the air and collects the other 4 stones from the table. Level 5. In the final level, the player holds all 5 stones in their hand, throws them into the air, catches them on the back of their hand, and flips their hand over to catch them before they fall. This game is also known as Korean Jackson 7 Stones. Once the player completes this without dropping any stones, they can move on to the next challenge. The 4th game was called Spinning Top. In this game, the player had to wind a string around an object and release it with the correct force. If the object wasn't released properly, it wouldn't spin. To win, the spinning top had to move with enough force on the ground. Once the top had completed its spin, the player could move on to the next game. The final game in this triathlon was Jegi, a traditional Korean game. The player had to kick a paper jegi into the air 5 times without letting it fall to the ground. After completing all the games, the players had to race to the finish line before time ran out. Failing to complete the games or cross the finish line would result in the players being shot and eliminated from the competition. Game 5, Mingle. The final game in Squid Game Season 2 was called Mingle, and it was one of the most brutal games. All the contestants were placed in a large room on a rotating carousel with a children's song playing in the background, adding a haunting atmosphere. When the music stopped, a number would be called, and players had to form a group of that exact size to enter a designated room. If a player didn't manage to form a group of the correct size, they would be shot on the spot. Even if players made it into a room, they weren't safe, as soldiers would come in and shoot anyone who didn't match the required number of people in the room. This game tested the players' loyalties. For example, if you were in a group of 5 and the number 4 was called, you'd have to decide whether to split into 2 smaller groups or stick together and hope for the best. The key to surviving this game was to always be in a room with the correct number of players until the soldiers declared the game over. Comparing these games to those from Season 1 of Squid Game, I would argue that Season 1 had more creative and complex challenges, such as dalgona, marbles, and glass stepping stones, all of which were considerably more difficult to win. So that's a breakdown of the games in Squid Game Season 2. If you want to learn more about the ending and a detailed analysis of the season, click on the card in the top corner or head over to my channel for more breakdowns of your favorite TV shows and movies. What was your favorite game from this season? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.